I guess I should say first of all that I'm not quite sure exactly what science studies is. So one of the things that interests me about the seminar is having an opportunity to figure out what this field is. Broadly speaking, my interest is in imperial power and biopolitics, and I'm looking specifically at cities and the way that there's an attempt to control and surveil cities in a variety of ways in response, for instance, in the 19th century to sort of fears developed through colonial and tropical medical discourses about contagion. For instance, fears about cholera in Calcutta, which originated in Bengal, but then because of the British development of a kind of elaborate infrastructure as a part of their colonizing process, spread across the subcontinent and then eventually got to Britain. So those kinds of discourses around the body and medicine are very much interesting to me. And then I'm, you know, from those early sort of imperial discourses all the way through contemporary instances of attempts to control territory using technologies like drones, for instance. So I'm sort of interested in the way in which robotic technologies get deployed in the course of contemporary U.S. imperial war-making and some of the philosophical and ethical implications of all of that. And of course, both of these instances that I've cited have to do with the theme of the seminar, which is embodiment. So, you know, on the one hand, the 19th century fears about bodily contagion. On the other hand, the sort of contemporary attempt to move ever further away from physical presence in U.S. war-making efforts so that no casualties are incurred. But then with all sorts of problematic ramifications about, you know, whether or not, for instance, Congress gets to approve, you know, what for all intents and purposes are targeted assassinations on the part, not even of the U.S. military anymore, but of, you know, covert forces like the CIA. And even broader kinds of questions. For instance, you know, now one of the latest drones is called the Gorgon Stare. And because previous drones only featured one camera, which could focus on a relatively limited area, the new technology features a whole array of cameras and can send, you know, multiple different information feedback loops to headquarters here in the United States. That creates all sorts of problems about who's going to be able to process all of that information. So there's a drive towards you know, robotic and automated data parsing on the part of the covert forces behind these things. So everything's moving towards increasingly disembodied and even artificial forms of intelligence. And so I'm very much thinking through those kinds of questions. And I would argue that there's some continuity, right? So, you know, fears about contagion in a 19th century city like Calcutta that lead to spatial segregation on the part of colonial authorities, British, you know, colonial authorities, are not entirely disconnected from concerns about, you know, mortality on the part of American troops fighting in places like Afghanistan that lead to this drive towards roboticization. So, those are where some of the questions, which I think the seminar is interested in exploring, intersect with my own work at the moment. That was a very long answer. No.